My name is Evelyn Hartley, and I've spent most of my life believing that if you just give enough of your time, your money, your heart, people will love you for it. I believe that raising a daughter alone after losing my husband at 41 would mean she'd always be close. I believe that when I opened my home to my granddaughter during her parents' divorce, I was creating memories she'd carry with pride. But here's what no one tells you. Sometimes the people you sacrifice the most for grow up to treat you like a leftover chore, like something expired sitting at the back of the fridge. On the day I turned 73, I learned that not only had my family forgotten what I gave, but they expected more and gave nothing in return. That's when everything began to shift. And what came next? Let's just say it wasn't the revenge story you'd expect, but it was mine. I've lived in the same cedar-sided house in Pensacola, Florida for over 40 years. It creaks in the right places and smells like sun-warm paper and lemon polish. My late husband, Walter, picked it for the backyard. He said he could picture our daughter, Deborah, learning to ride her bike between the oak trees. She did. She fell 3 times, cried once, and rode like the wind on the 4th try. I stood on the porch with my hands over my mouth, so proud I thought I might burst. That porch saw a lot of life. It's where Deborah graduated high school in a too big borrowed gown. It's where I held her daughter Ashley the day she was born, 6 pounds, quiet as a moth. Ashley's dad left 2 months later, and Deborah moved back in for a while. A while turned into years. I picked up extra shifts at the library to keep groceries in the fridge and ballet shoes on Ashley's feet. I didn't complain. Back then, I thought, this is what family does. You carry each other. Even after Deborah remarried and moved into a condo across town, I kept my door open. Ashley stayed with me nearly every weekend. We baked oatmeal cookies and watched black and white movies. I taught her how to press wildflowers in old phone books and label them with proper Latin names. She was curious and kind. At least she used to be. Somewhere between her 15th birthday and her college graduation, that kindness vanished. She stopped visiting. Deborah said she was finding herself. I started hearing about Ashley through Instagram posts my neighbor's daughter showed me. Travel photos, branded outfits, and hashtags like #levelup and #nolimits. Not a single one with me, not a single birthday call in years. Still, I remembered hers. Every time I passed the makeup aisle, I thought of her favorite lipstick. When I saw a new art supply set at the craft store, I paused and pictured her tiny hands smudged with ink from our printmaking days. I wrapped gifts she never picked up and left voicemails she never returned. Deborah, for her part, didn't seem much better. Our phone calls became shorter. Polite, scripted. "Hi, Mom. Just checking in. Ashley's great. Work's busy. You okay? Okay, love you. Gotta run." I started writing down what I wanted to say before she called, just to make sure I didn't forget during her 2-minute window. And still, I hoped. I hoped they'd remember the Christmas I pawned my wedding band so Ashley could have the easel she wanted. The summer I used my vacation days to drive her to a camp in Tallahassee because Deborah was too slammed with work. The night I stayed up sewing her dress for the middle school dance because the one she wanted was too expensive for her mom. People say older folks are forgetful, but let me tell you, nothing sticks in your mind like love you gave without question. That love piled up inside me like folded letters no one asked for. I didn't share this with my friends. Most of them were in similar boats, alone, semi-forgotten, managing meds and memories in equal measure. We smiled over coffee and said things like, "At least they're busy and doing well." But we felt it, the ache. By the time my 73rd birthday rolled around, I wasn't expecting much. Maybe a text, maybe a grocery store cake. I told myself not to hope for more, but I did hope. Because when you've given everything, even when you try to let go, there's still a thread in you that whispers, maybe this year they'll remember who you are. I didn't know then that this birthday would be the one that changed everything, not because of a card or a hug or a thank you, but because of a slap and a winning lottery ticket and a choice to finally stop begging for a seat at the table and start building one of my own. I didn't expect a parade or anything for my birthday, but I did expect them to show up. A week before the day, I called Deborah just to check if they were still coming. "We'll be there, Mom," she said, like I'd asked her if the sun planned to rise tomorrow. "Don't cook, I'll bring a cake." Her tone was clipped, like she was confirming a dentist appointment. "Ashley's flying in that morning. She has a brand shoot in Miami, but she'll make time." Make time. For her grandmother, the one who packed her school lunches for 7 years straight and stitched her Halloween costumes by hand. But now I was just something to fit in between airport runs and selfies. I cleaned the house from top to bottom that week, polished the windows, replaced the old porch mat, bought Ashley's favorite trail mix and organic green tea, even though I didn't like the taste of either. I even printed a photo of the three of us from when Ashley was 8, sitting on the beach with juice boxes and sandy toes, and framed it. I don't know why I still tried. Maybe because part of me believed that if I made everything just right, they might remember what it felt like to love me. The night before my birthday, I baked a small lemon loaf. Not for them, just for me. Walter used to bring me lemon cake every year, even when he forgot to buy milk. The smell filled the kitchen and brought me back to a version of my life that felt warmer. The morning of my birthday, I woke up at 5 like always, fed the cat, watered the ferns, put on my lavender sweater. The one Ashley once said made me look like an anthropology grandma. I wasn't sure if it was a compliment, but I kept the sweater anyway. By 3 in the afternoon, I'd been pacing for an hour. They were late. At 4, I heard the tires on gravel. A shiny white SUV pulled up. Out stepped Deborah in a tailored blazer, holding a cake box from a grocery store. Ashley emerged behind her, phone in hand, sunglasses on, though the sky was gray. They came inside without much fanfare. No hugs, just "Happy birthday, Mom," and "Hey, Gran," as they set things down. Ashley barely looked up from her phone. Deborah pulled out paper plates from her tote bag, like she didn't trust my china. I offered them tea. Ashley declined with a wrinkled nose. "I'm intermittent fasting." "Oh," I said, embarrassed. "I didn't know." "Of course you didn't," she muttered, typing something. Deborah laughed lightly, trying to smooth it over. "You know how trends are, Mom. She's always doing something new." We sat around the table while they scrolled and whispered and occasionally glanced at me like I was the teacher supervising detention. I tried to bring up old times, when Ashley and I used to go to the public library on Saturdays, or when Deborah and I used to pick blueberries after work. "Can we not do memory lane today?" Ashley said flatly. "Let's just eat cake." Deborah nodded as if that was perfectly reasonable. The cake was dry. No one ate more than a bite. That's when I gave Ashley the gift I'd made, an album of photos and pressed flowers from the garden we'd planted together when she was 10. She flipped through it without saying a word, then slid it into her tote bag like it was a coupon flyer. "You used to love picking those," I said quietly. She looked up. "I was a child." Silence. I tried again. "And your grandpa, remember how he used to sing to the cat whenever we had birthdays?" Ashley sighed loudly. "Gran, why do you always have to bring up the past? We're here now, okay? Isn't that enough?" Before I could answer, she got a text. She laughed, at the screen, not at me. Deborah stood up. "We should get going. The restaurant reservation's at 6. They'd scheduled dinner, on my birthday, without me. And here's the thing I want to ask you all, especially those of you who've ever sat through a moment like that. Have you ever felt like you disappeared in the middle of your own family gathering? Like you were present, but nobody really saw you? Let me know in the comments if that ever happened to you, because I swear, it feels like being erased slowly, one sentence at a time. Before they left, Deborah handed me an envelope. It's just a little something. A gift card to a beauty supply store I'd never heard of. $100, no note. Ashley air-kissed the air next to my cheek. "Gotta run, Gran. Flights, you know." I nodded. "Of course." As the door closed behind them, I stood in my kitchen, holding a paper plate with one untouched slice of cake and a gift card I'd never use. The house was silent again, except for the old clock ticking and the wind shaking the lemon tree outside. They hadn't stayed even 30 minutes. I went to the living room, sat down slowly, and stared at the framed beach photo on the side table. The sunlight had started to fade from it. They used to love me. didn't they? Or maybe I had mistaken dependency for love. Either way, the message was clear now. What I gave wasn't just forgotten, it had expired. And that was when the hurt began to harden into something else entirely, something sharper, something colder, and something that would, in time, become a story worth remembering. After they left, I didn't cry. I didn't even sigh. I just sat there in my lavender sweater, staring at the crumbs on the table like they might rearrange themselves into a message. But the room stayed quiet, still, and so painfully clean, like they'd never been here at all. That's the thing about this kind of hurt. It's not loud. It doesn't scream or break dishes. It just seeps in quietly and settles behind your ribs, like cold air that never leaves. I didn't touch the leftover cake. I wrapped it in foil and slid it into the fridge like it was something sacred, though I knew I wouldn't eat it. It just didn't feel right to throw it away. Not yet. I took off the sweater, folded it over the back of the chair, and went upstairs. I left the porch light on. Not for them, but for myself. Some habits are hard to break. The next few days were quiet in a way that felt heavier than usual. I didn't get a follow-up call from Deborah. No thanks for the visit text from Ashley. The framed photo of us on the beach stayed exactly where I left it, untouched, but somehow it looked more distant now, like it belonged to a different family altogether. Monday morning, I walked down to the mailbox and waved at my neighbor Martha, who didn't ask how my birthday went. Maybe she could see it in my face, or maybe she already knew the script. Women our age often do. Inside the mailbox was a stack of coupons, a charity letter, and one envelope from the Florida State Lottery office. At first, I thought it was junk mail, one of those promotional things that say, "You may have won," in all caps just to get your attention. But this one had my name spelled correctly, and it had a barcode at the bottom. I blinked, suddenly remembering the scratch-off ticket I'd bought on a whim the week before. Not even as a birthday gift to myself, just something I grabbed at the checkout between bananas and eggs. I'd scratched off half of it with a house key, seen some matching numbers, then tossed it into the kitchen drawer, meaning to check it later. Later never came. Until now. I opened the drawer, found the ticket under a rubber band ball and a box of birthday candles from last year. I pulled up the lottery app on my phone, scanned the barcode with trembling fingers. At first, I thought the screen was wrong. $1,100,000. $1,100,000. I scanned it again. Same result. The room didn't spin. The floor didn't fall out from under me. I just sat there, ticket in one hand, phone in the other, staring at two things that suddenly felt very, very real. Then I laughed. Not a joyful laugh, not one of relief or triumph. It was the kind of laugh that comes from somewhere deep in your chest, like the sound you make when you realize you've been holding your breath for 10 years. I sat at the table for a long time, letting the moment settle. The windows let in the soft Florida light. The lemon tree outside swayed gently in the breeze. I was rich, quietly, privately rich, and no one knew. For the first time in a long while, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Not the kind you flaunt, the kind you keep, the kind that comes from knowing you don't have to ask for permission anymore. I didn't think of cruises or cars or granite countertops. I thought of silence. I thought of how they left me sitting alone on my birthday with a dry slice of store-bought cake and an empty hallway where a hug should have been. I thought of Ashley's eyes, how she barely met mine, and the way she tucked away the photo album like it was clutter. I thought of all the years I spent stitching her life together while mine quietly unraveled. I looked at that ticket, and I knew one thing. They wouldn't be getting a dime. But I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. The kind of peace that comes when you stop trying to prove you're worth loving. I tucked the ticket into a book on my shelf. To Kill a Mockingbird. A novel I used to read to Ashley when she was little. I wondered if she even remembered. Probably not. That night, I went through my photo albums page by page. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just looked. Really looked at the woman in those pictures. She was always doing something for someone else, holding the camera while others smiled, cooking in the background, sewing, driving, smiling even when her eyes were tired, always showing up, always giving. But when had anyone shown up for her? When had anyone looked at her and said, "You matter just as you are"? That night, I took out a fresh notebook, the leather one Deborah gave me 5 Christmases ago with the tag still on it, and I wrote a single sentence on the first page. This time, I choose me. I underlined it twice, and I meant it. I didn't tell anyone about the winning ticket, not a soul. It stayed tucked in To Kill a Mockingbird between page 143 and 144, the part where Atticus says, "You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view." I used to read that to Ashley at bedtime. Now I read it alone and let the words fall differently. The days that followed were oddly calm. I didn't run out to buy anything. No new car, no trip to Paris, no revenge shopping spree. I just breathed. And for the first time in years, I realized how long I'd been holding my breath. I stopped answering Deborah's texts, which only came once a week anyway. Usually something like, "You good?" or "Ashley's flying to New York." Not a question, just a broadcast. I didn't respond. I figured if they noticed, they'd call. They didn't. I started cooking for one without resentment. I made lemon chicken and didn't care if no one else wanted a piece. I drank coffee on the porch without imagining another chair filled. I began to find peace in the empty. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was awake. There was one afternoon, though, that pulled me under again, but only for a moment. I had driven to the local bookstore, the one with the creaky floor and the handwritten cash-only sign taped to the counter. I hadn't been there in years. The woman who used to own it had passed, but someone had reopened it recently. The place smelled like ink and dust and old stories. I was browsing the memoir section when I heard a familiar laugh, low, warm, sincere. I turned and saw him, Troy, Ashley's ex-husband. He was standing by the poetry shelf in paint-splattered jeans and a chambray shirt, holding a stack of handmade journals. He looked tired but not broken. Focused, like someone who'd learned to move through loss without becoming it. I hadn't seen him in 5 years. The divorce had been quick. Ashley said he was too ordinary for her brand, said he had no ambition. I remembered that night. She came over crying, said she needed to reset her life, and asked if she could crash in my guest room for a few days. She stayed for 3 months, then left like it never happened. Troy saw me and blinked, surprised. Then he smiled. Not awkwardly, not politely, genuinely. "Mrs. Hartley?" "Evelyn," I corrected. "I think we're old enough to drop the formalities." He chuckled. "Fair enough." We talked for nearly an hour. I learned he'd been working odd jobs while trying to start a letterpress printing business, an art form I taught Ashley to love when she was a kid, back when we made holiday cards by hand. Turns out, Troy had loved it too, still did. "I found peace in it," he said, eyes steady, even when everything else fell apart. When I left the store that day, I sat in my car for a long while, and something shifted. For months, maybe years, I had been mourning what I lost, time, respect, connection. I thought if I could just make them remember, just get them to see me again, I'd feel whole. But I didn't need them to see me. I needed to see myself. Troy had been cast aside by Ashley just like I had, but he wasn't bitter. He was building, quietly, without applause, without asking anyone's permission. That night, I made tea and sat in the quiet kitchen. I pulled out the leather notebook I'd started and wrote, "They cast us out like we were weight to shed, but we were the roots they stood on." I paused, let the pen hover. Then I added, "I don't need their seat at the table. I can build my own and choose who sits with me." It wasn't just a thought anymore. It was a decision. That was the moment I stopped being the version of myself that waited to be seen, thanked, remembered. That woman had spent decades planting, giving, sacrificing, and had been discarded like worn lace. Now, I wasn't planting for them anymore. I was planting for me. And maybe, just maybe, For someone who'd been forgotten, too. Someone who still believed in kindness, in art, in quiet work done with honest hands. Someone like Troy. 2 weeks after that afternoon in the bookstore, I found myself standing in Troy's garage, staring at a hulking steel letterpress machine that looked older than both of us combined. "It doesn't look like much now," he said, wiping oil from his fingers with an old bandana. "But give me a few more months, and this thing will be rolling again." I didn't answer right away. My eyes drifted across the cluttered space. Boxes of typeface blocks, half-built shelves, swatches of thick cotton paper hanging from clothespins. It smelled like ink and cedar and a kind of quiet hope I hadn't felt in years. "You know," I said slowly, "when Ashley was 10, I taught her how to mix ink with a spoon because we didn't have the fancy tools." Troy smiled. "She mentioned that once. Said you were the only reason she knew anything about printmaking." I didn't know what to say to that. I think part of me had given up believing any piece of me had stuck with her at all. I pulled out a folded piece of paper from my purse. The winning ticket, still in perfect condition, though I had touched it a dozen times in secret like a charm I wasn't sure I was worthy of. "I have something," I said. Troy raised an eyebrow. I told him everything. About the ticket, the birthday, the silence, the shift. He didn't interrupt. Didn't react with shock or questions. He just listened. Really listened. Like he knew the weight of not being heard. When I finished, I said, "I want to invest in you." His eyes widened. "Evelyn, not as a loan, not for show, and not because I want anything back." He shook his head, overwhelmed. "But why me?" "Because you're the only person in this whole family who still builds something with their hands," I said. "Because you remind me of who I used to be before I let everyone else tell me who I should be." It took some convincing. He didn't want to feel like a charity case. I didn't want to feel like I was buying redemption. So we made an agreement. I'd be a silent partner. He'd name the shop. I'd have no say in the design or operations. I'd just believe in it. And him. We sealed it with a handshake and a shared understanding. The following months moved quietly, like a new season slipping in under the door. I didn't post anything on Facebook. I didn't tell Deborah. I didn't reach out to Ashley. I focused on small joys. Morning walks to the market, dinner recipes I'd been too tired to try before. Reading again, not to escape, but to enjoy. Sometimes I'd stop by the studio to drop off lunch or help fold brochures. I never stayed long. It wasn't about hovering. It was about witnessing something grow. Something mine, in a way that didn't require anyone else's approval. Troy named the place Second Impressions. A nod to printing, yes, but also to the idea that sometimes life offers you a second chance, not with noise, but with grace. Word got around town quickly. The local paper did a small feature. A few wedding vendors reached out for custom invitations. He started teaching weekend workshops for kids. One afternoon, a young mother stopped by and whispered to me, "Thank you for helping this place exist." I smiled, but didn't explain. It wasn't about the money. It was about meaning. I didn't keep track of how much I spent. I didn't need to. I'd lived long enough to know what real wealth looked like, and it wasn't in spreadsheets or status updates. It was in purpose, in peace, in planting something good even when no one's watching. For the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting for recognition. I was just living. And that, strangely enough, made me more visible to myself than I had ever been. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the trees outside cast long shadows across the studio floor, Troy handed me a folded card. "What's this?" I asked. He shrugged. "Just something we printed last week. Thought it might speak to you." Inside, in letterpressed ink on thick ivory stock, were the words, "You were never invisible. They just weren't looking." I didn't cry. I just nodded, because I finally understood. They didn't forget me because I disappeared. They forgot me because they never truly saw me in the first place. But I see me now, and that's enough. The day Second Impressions officially opened its doors, I arrived early, not to cut a ribbon or give a speech, but just to sweep the front step. Troy was inside rearranging display trays, the scent of fresh ink and coffee mingling in the air. There was a chalkboard sign out front that read, "Grand opening today. Come see what second chances look like." I stood by the window for a while, sipping tea from a travel mug and watching as the first few guests trickled in. Parents with curious toddlers, young couples looking for wedding ideas, retirees like me just happy to see something handcrafted still had a place in this world. Troy greeted them all, calm and gracious. No flash, no ego, just quiet confidence. It was like watching a garden bloom after years of drought. Around mid-morning, a familiar voice cut through the buzz. "Gran?" I turned. Ashley stood at the door, a tote bag slung over one shoulder, designer sunglasses perched on her head. Behind her, Deborah hovered, arms crossed. I blinked. "Well, hello." Ashley looked confused. "What is this?" Deborah chimed in, sharp as ever. "We saw the article in the community paper. Why didn't you tell us about this?" I gestured to the room. "Didn't think you were interested in things that didn't show up on Instagram." Ashley flushed, but said nothing. They walked in slowly, eyes scanning the walls, the stacks of letterpress cards, the framed prints of vintage fonts and pressed floral bookmarks. Troy was helping a couple pick out personalized stationery and didn't seem fazed by their presence. "I don't understand," Ashley said. "You funded this?" I smiled gently. "Yes." "But why him?" she asked, voice tinged with disbelief. "You barely know him." "No," I said, locking eyes with her, but I knew enough. Deborah stepped forward. "Mom, you had $1 million and didn't tell us? You didn't ask." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was clarifying. Ashley looked around again, then down at the custom-printed thank you cards on the counter. One design had a quote, "Gratitude is quieter than applause, but it lasts longer." She picked it up, stared at it for a moment, then set it down. No apology, no, "I'm sorry we forgot your birthday." Just that small gesture, as if she finally understood, if only a little, what had been lost. They didn't stay long. A few minutes later, Ashley said she had a shoot to get to. Deborah followed her out with a terse, "We'll call." I didn't hold my breath, but for the first time, I didn't feel like I needed them to see me anymore, because they had, for just a moment. And even if they never did again, it was enough. Later that afternoon, Troy came over with 2 glasses of lemonade. "You okay?" "I am," I said truthfully. He looked out at the now busy studio. "Did you think they'd come?" "I didn't think about it at all," I said. "That's how I knew I was healing." We clinked glasses and sat for a moment, letting the breeze drift through the open door. And now, if I can ask you something, have you ever reached that point where you stopped waiting for someone to thank you? Stopped needing the people who hurt you to make it right? Because I think that's what true peace is, when you no longer need recognition to know your worth. If you've ever been there or wish you could get there, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. You'd be surprised how many of us carry the same ache. That night, I walked home through the dusky streets of my neighborhood, past the houses I'd walked by for 40 years. I saw familiar windows glowing warm. Someone had wind chimes on their porch, and they sounded like tiny promises floating in the dark. I reached my front door and paused. For the first time, the porch light wasn't on for anyone else. Just me. Inside, the lemon loaf I had baked the night before was still on the counter. I cut a slice, poured myself a glass of milk, and sat by the window. I didn't think of the things I'd lost. I thought of the things I had quietly reclaimed, not wealth, not revenge, but space. And finally, the right to fill it however I chose. It had been almost 2 months since the shop opened, and the air in my life felt cleaner, lighter. I no longer woke up with that tightness in my chest, the one that used to whisper, "You're not needed anymore." Now, I woke up with a list of herbs to clip from the garden, or a new poem I wanted to press onto paper at the shop. Then, one Tuesday morning, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I peeked through the blinds, and there she was. Ashley. Her hair was slicked back into a tight ponytail, and she wore a trench coat far too fancy for our quiet street. But her eyes, those were different. I opened the door slowly. "Well, this is a surprise." She gave a sheepish smile. "Hi, Gran, do you have a minute?" I stepped aside. She didn't wait for an invitation. Walked in like she used to when she was 5, and still thought I was her whole world. We sat in the kitchen. She looked around like it was a museum. "I forgot how cozy this place is." I poured her tea, didn't offer sugar. She didn't ask. She cleared her throat. "So, Mom told me about the lottery ticket." I nodded. Figured she would eventually. She looked down at her hands. No manicure this time, no rings, just chipped polish and nervous fingers. "I guess I was surprised," she said. "Were you?" I sipped. "I mean," she continued, "you never said anything, not to me, not when we visited." "You didn't ask," I replied, echoing my words to Deborah. Ashley gave a small huff of a laugh. "Fair." We sat there in silence, the kind that doesn't push but waits. Then she said, "I've been thinking a lot lately about how I handled your birthday, about how I've handled a lot of things." I didn't answer. Let her carry that weight a little longer. She pressed on. "Gran, I was awful. I didn't mean to be, but I was. And now, I don't know. I just feel like I missed something really important. I miss you." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. I believed the crack, but I didn't move. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. "I hate that this might come off the wrong way," she said quickly. "But I've been thinking about starting a little online store, just simple stuff. Handmade journals, pressed flower bookmarks, maybe even some poetry prints. Kind of like what you and Troy do, but with a modern twist." She pushed the envelope toward me. "Just, in case you'd want to invest, or be part of it somehow. We could even call it something with your name, like Evelyn's Legacy, or something soft and timeless." I didn't touch the envelope. Instead, I asked, "Why now?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" "Why now, Ashley? Why come back now after everything?" She looked at me, and for the first time didn't try to fake her answer, "Because I thought you'd be alone forever. And when I saw you weren't, when I saw you with something of your own, I realized I wasn't as important as I thought, and that scared me." I appreciated the honesty, truly, but it didn't change anything. I pushed the envelope back. "I already invested in something," I said softly. "It's called peace." She nodded slowly, absorbing the hit like someone who knew she'd earned it. "But," I added, "if you ever want to come by the shop, not to pitch or ask or sell, but just to fold paper or mix ink or watch how something real gets made, you're welcome." She didn't cry. I didn't expect her to. Ashley didn't do tears, but she did sit with it, and that was more than I ever got before. When she left, she gave me a real hug, not the kind where your arms float, the kind that says I see you. And when the door closed, I sat back at the table and whispered to no one in particular. She came back, but I didn't need her to. A week after Ashley came by, she showed up again, this time without the fancy coat or the pitch. Just a flannel shirt, jeans, and a small container of banana bread that looked a little overbaked on the edges. I opened the door and raised an eyebrow. "It's gluten-free," she said. I tried. I stepped aside and let her in. She didn't rush to the kitchen. She didn't try to talk business. She just looked around like she was seeing the house for the first time in years. "I always loved the smell of this place," she said. "Lemon and something warm, like a hug in scent form." I didn't respond, just set the bread on the counter and handed her a plate. We sat in the living room this time, no pretense. She didn't pull out papers or a laptop. She just sat, legs tucked under her, like she used to as a kid when I'd read her stories. "I miss when things were simple," she said. I nodded slowly. Simple only feels simple when you're the one being taken care of. That landed. Her eyes dropped to her hands. "Gran, I was selfish. I know that. I think I always thought you'd just be there, like the wallpaper, like air." You only notice air when it's gone, I said. She gave a sad little laugh. Exactly. There was something softer about her this time, not performative, not strategic. It was like she was trying to come home, but not in the physical sense, in the soul sense. We talked about small things, a book I was reading, a pie crust that went wrong. She told me about a friend going through a divorce and how she was trying to be there, even if she didn't know how. For once, Ashley wasn't trying to impress me. She was just present. That night, after she left, I sat with my tea and thought about what had changed. She was still my granddaughter, but the roles had shifted. I wasn't waiting for her approval. I wasn't hoping for her affection. I had rebuilt something in me, and now I could see her as she was, not as the child I'd once raised or the ideal I'd held onto for too long. The next time I saw her, it was at the shop. She slipped in on a quiet Thursday afternoon, when only a few customers were browsing. Troy was setting up a custom order for a bridal shower. I was trimming bookmarks near the window. Ashley stood at the door for a moment before stepping in, almost reverently, like she didn't want to disturb the rhythm of the space. She watched Troy work, eyes curious, and then turned to me. "Can I help today?" I paused. "Doing what?" "I don't know," she said. "Folding things? Sweeping? Making tea?" I glanced at Troy, who gave the tiniest of nods and then handed her a stack of thank you cards to crease along the folds. She sat across from me, took a deep breath, and started. At first, her lines were crooked, her folds sloppy, but she didn't complain. She just kept trying. And as the minutes passed, something unspoken settled between us. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't resolution. It was something more subtle. Recognition. She was beginning to see the quiet work that had made her life possible. And I was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was ready to carry a little of it herself. Later, Troy asked me, "You think she's really changing?" I thought for a while before answering. "I don't know, but I'm not changing back just because she wants to." And that was the difference. I had always bent, always made space, always softened to accommodate others. But now, I was standing tall in my own home, in my own shop, in my own skin. Ashley could join me here, or not, but I wouldn't shrink again. That night, I found an old photo in one of my kitchen drawers. It was from Ashley's 6th birthday. She was sitting on my lap, face smeared with frosting, both of us laughing like we had all the time in the world. I slipped it into a new frame and placed it on my shelf. Not as a symbol of regret, but of history, of where we came from, and how far I'd traveled, alone, yes, but not bitter. Sometimes healing doesn't come in grand gestures. It comes in creases on a folded card, in the silence between two people who finally stop pretending, in the soft click of a shop door opening and staying open. It was a Wednesday when Deborah showed up, not a holiday, not a birthday, just a plain, overcast Wednesday where the clouds hung low like unfinished thoughts. She didn't call first, just pulled into my driveway in her dark gray SUV, still wearing her work badge clipped to her sweater. I opened the door and leaned on the frame. "Mom," she said softly. I didn't answer right away. I just stepped aside. She walked in slower than Ashley had, looked around like she was trying to remember something she used to know well. Her eyes landed on the picture of me and Ashley on the shelf, the one I'd framed just last week. "You kept that," she said. "Of course I did," I replied. We moved into the kitchen. She didn't sit down, just stood by the counter, fiddling with the strap of her purse. "I owe you an apology," she said. I poured us each a cup of tea and sat. "That's a start." She looked down. "I don't know what happened to us. Somewhere between building my life and raising Ashley, I forgot how much you were still giving." "You didn't forget," I said. "You just stopped looking." She winced, but didn't argue. That was something. "I've been thinking about your birthday," she continued, "about how wrong I was, about how I let Ashley behave and how I behaved. You made that whole album by hand and we didn't even—" Her voice cracked. She cleared her throat. I watched her closely. Deborah was not a woman who cried easily, not in front of people, not even me. She always believed that strength looked like composure, like silence under pressure. But there she was, struggling to hold together something already cracked. "I didn't come here for money," she said. "I know about the ticket. I know what you did for Troy, and I know I don't deserve a cent." "You don't," I said gently. She nodded, not insulted, just accepting. "I came because I realized I've been standing in the same spot for years, waiting for things to get better without doing any of the work." That line hit me harder than anything else she'd said, because for the first time in years, I believed her. "Did Ashley put you up to this?" I asked, half teasing. She chuckled. "Actually, no. She warned me you might not even open the door." I sipped my tea, then asked, "So, what changed?" She paused, then said, "I saw that little girl folding cards in your shop, not just playing helper, actually working, quietly, listening. That's when I knew you'd built something stronger than anger." I didn't reply. I let her sit with the truth of that. "And if I may ask you something, do you believe people can change after it's too late to fix the damage? Or do you think some bridges, once burned, should stay ash? I know many of you watching have lived that choice. I'm curious, did you open the door again, or was the silence the only piece left? If that question touches something in you, share it. Sometimes your story is the one another woman needs to hear." Back in the kitchen, Deborah finally sat down. "I'm not asking for us to go back," she said. "I just want to know if there's a way forward." I thought about that for a long moment. Then I said, "You can come by the shop on Tuesdays. We print bookmarks then. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work." She gave the smallest smile. "Okay, Tuesdays." She stood, gathered her bag, and before she left, she paused in the hallway. "There's something else I wanted to say," she added. "You didn't just raise me. You saved me more than once, and I never said thank you properly." I looked at her, feeling the weight of decades pass between us in a heartbeat. "You're welcome," I said, "but this time, you'll have to earn the rest." She nodded, then walked out the door. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt steady, like I had finally stopped trying to be seen by people who were never looking. Now they had turned around. Now they were seeing me, not because I demanded it, but because I had stopped needing it. The funny thing about healing is that it doesn't make a sound. No one throws you a party when you start sleeping through the night again. There's no parade when your chest stops clenching at the sound of their name. No one notices when you stop checking your phone for a message that's never coming. But you notice, you feel it, and that's enough. I started hosting Sunday print workshops at Second Impressions. Nothing big, just 6 or 7 people sitting around the long table in the back room, learning how to press poetry onto handmade paper. The first one was mostly locals, bookstore owners, retired teachers, a curious teenager who liked fonts. The second one brought a couple from 3 towns over. By the third Sunday, we had a waiting list. People started calling me Miss Evelyn with this warmth I hadn't felt in years. Not out of obligation, not because I was someone's mother or grandmother, just me. Even the mayor's wife came by to order 300 letterpress thank you notes for an upcoming fundraiser. Said our paper felt alive. Said there was something real about it she couldn't explain. I smiled but didn't explain it either. It wasn't the paper, it was the hands behind it. Ashley came to a workshop one Sunday. She didn't say a word when she entered, just grabbed an apron, tied it neatly, and sat beside a woman named Georgia, who made watercolor journals. She didn't tell anyone who she was, didn't mention the word influencer, didn't correct someone who thought she was just Evelyn's assistant. She folded cards, learned how to press wildflowers, listened. At the end of the session, Georgia turned to her and said, "You've got a good eye." Ashley smiled and replied, "I learned from someone good." I didn't say anything, just watched from across the room, heart steady. Later that evening, I saw her linger by the front desk, watching as Troy boxed up an order. "You really built something here," she said softly to him. "No," he said. "Your grandmother did. I'm just lucky enough to be part of it." She nodded. "I used to think she was just quiet, but she's actually strong." He smiled. "Those two things aren't opposites. The shop got a small write-up in the State Arts Journal. A woman I didn't know messaged me asking if I'd consider mentoring her for a residency. Someone else tagged us in a reel on social media with the caption, "Her hands remember what her family forgot." I didn't repost it. I didn't need to. The world had turned without me chasing it. And somehow, I had become its quiet axis. Deborah came to visit one Thursday afternoon. She brought lunch from the cafe 2 doors down, tuna melts and lemonade. She didn't talk about money, or inheritance, or the shop. She asked how my herbs were doing, if the basil was still bolting too fast. She told me her coworker's mom had started quilting again at 75. "I think about that a lot lately," she said. "How many women stop before they're actually done?" I looked at her carefully. "You mean stop living or stop giving?" She shrugged. "Both, maybe." We ate quietly. Just before she left, she asked, "Do you think Ashley really gets it now?" I took a long sip of my lemonade before answering. "She might," I said. "But even if she doesn't, I'm not living for her to catch up anymore." Deborah nodded slowly. "That's fair." She paused at the door. "I envy you a little. The peace, the clarity. I'm still so tired all the time." Nas. I looked at her, this woman I raised who had drifted so far, and realized something startling. I didn't need her to become anything different for me to be happy. She could remain unfinished. I was whole now. And maybe that's the real twist in all of this. Not that I won the lottery. Not that I funded the man my granddaughter discarded. Not that I built a business in my 70s. The twist is that I came back to life after everyone else had already moved on without me. And now, they're standing on the outside, watching something they can't quite re-enter. That's not revenge. That's reclamation. That's what it means to rise. Not loudly, not spitefully, but fully. The first snowfall of the year came early. It dusted the edges of the shop window like powdered sugar and made the pressed flowers on our cards look even more delicate somehow, like nature's second breath. Ashley came by that afternoon. No announcement, no camera crew. Just her and a scarf she used to borrow from me when she was in high school. She stood in the doorway for a long time before stepping in. "Hey, Gran." "Hey, baby," I said, still trimming a run of card edges by the light of the window. She wandered over to the corner wall where our framed quote prints hung. Her eyes landed on one that said, "Some of us bloom late, but oh, when we do." "I used to think that one was kind of cheesy," she said, a little laugh in her voice. "But now I think it might be the realest thing I've ever read." I didn't say anything, just let her sit with the words. She walked slowly, tracing her fingers over the wooden display crates, the ink-stained trays, the metal press handle. Then she turned to me. "Do you ever think maybe we don't realize what we have until it belongs to someone else?" I looked up. "All the time." She swallowed. "I used to think this shop was just a little side thing, something you did because you had free time and nowhere else to be. And now? I see how wrong I was. I see it every time I walk in here and someone smiles at you like you're the reason they got out of bed today." She paused, then added, "I missed so much. Guinea ease." I set the blade down, wiped my hands on my apron. "Ashley, I'm not angry anymore, but I'm also not giving my time away like I used to. I spent too many years being a background character in my own life." She nodded slowly. "I get that now." Her eyes welled up, and for once she didn't wipe the tears away. She let them fall. "I thought I could always come back and pick up where we left off," she said. "I thought you'd always be there, waiting." I gently shook my head. "I stopped waiting, baby. That's how I started healing." She came by every week that December, not to ask, not to explain, just to show up. Sometimes she helped Troy sweep up. Other times she sat quietly at the back table folding paper or practicing her letterpress skills. And I began to notice something new. She wasn't trying to be seen anymore. She was trying to see. One day, she brought a young woman with her, a client turned friend, she said, who had just lost her mother. "She's trying to start over." Ashley explained, and I thought maybe watching something be made with care might help her believe in starting again. That's when I knew Ashley had changed. Not because she said sorry, but because she began offering to others what she once withheld from me: presence. But even so, the timeline couldn't be undone. There was a chapter of my life she would never be part of, and she felt that. One night after closing, we sat together as I packaged a custom order. She looked at me with glassy eyes and said, "I think what hurts the most is knowing you had all that joy and peace, and I wasn't part of it." I stopped folding, looked her in the eye. "You were invited," I said gently. "You just didn't come." Deborah came by for Christmas Eve dinner. It was simple: roast chicken, mashed sweet potatoes, a pie from the corner bakery. We ate together like people who had lost too much time and weren't willing to lose more. During dessert, she looked around the table, at Ashley, at Troy, at me, and said, "I wish I had asked sooner what you needed instead of always telling you what I expected." That's the thing about regret. It doesn't wear a dramatic costume. It just slips into the room quietly, sits beside you and says, "This could have been different." But by then, you've already built a life in its absence. Later that week, Troy handed me a letter. Ashley had written it after our last conversation. Inside, she wrote, "I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know I finally understand what you were worth. And I know that price is too high to reclaim." It wasn't an apology. It was an acknowledgement. And maybe, for some of us, that's the greatest form of justice. The morning light filtered through the shop windows at Second Impressions, illuminating the dust motes dancing above the work tables. It was quiet, save for the soft hum of the heater and the distant call of a mockingbird outside. I walked through the rows of letterpress cards, ran my fingers over the embossed poetry, and felt a gentle swell of pride. Pride rooted not in loud applause, but in knowing I had built this world myself. It had been over 2 years since I first tucked that winning ticket into To Kill a Mockingbird. In that time, I'd seen my life shift from empty rooms to a space full of purpose. Each print run, each handcrafted bookmark, each nervous student in my workshops had reminded me that my worth wasn't measured by family approval or obligation. It was measured by the quiet moments when creation and connection intersected. No one in my family watched the shop's growth on social media. They heard about it through word of mouth, whispers in the farmer's market, an occasional magazine feature. I didn't mind. I'd learned that true success often happens beyond the glare of Instagram stories and flashy headlines. It thrives in the handwritten thank you notes a bride sent me, in the local librarian who recommended our classes to seniors, in the way Troy's face brightened when a client said, "Your grandmother believed in me." Sunday mornings still belonged to the print workshops. 6 or 8 people, sometimes a mother-daughter pair, sometimes a lonely retiree seeking a new start, would gather, breathing in the scent of ink and possibility. I would open the session with a simple welcome, then step back and watch hands fold, press, and ink become art. The room would fill with quiet concentration and occasional laughter. No drama, just genuine focus, a sanctuary from the outside world. The press itself had become a symbol of resilience. Its heavy metal frame bore the scars of age. But every time it rolled and left a perfect impression, it spoke of reclamation, the beauty that emerges when something old is given new purpose. I often thought of that scarred machine as a mirror of myself, sturdy and reliable, its value recognized only by those who paused long enough to appreciate it. One afternoon in autumn, a woman I'd never met arrived carrying a portfolio. She introduced herself as Iris, an art professor from the university who taught printmaking. She asked if I would consider hosting a residency, an advanced workshop series for her students. She explained that young artists were eager to learn hands-on techniques that transcended digital design. She said, "Your shop is a living lesson in patience and craft. I agreed without hesitation and scheduled the first intensive workshop for the following spring. As winter melted into spring, the residency brought fresh energy. 20 students arrived, each tackling their first letterpress blocks, meticulously setting type, experimenting with color. I would walk among them, offering guidance, sharing stories of early mistakes, like the time I misaligned an entire batch of invitations because I'd neglected to secure the frisket. They laughed, reassured that learning is sometimes messy, and I felt at home in the role of mentor, passing on the legacy I had reclaimed. Meanwhile, family invitations remained infrequent. Deborah would drop by with a casserole now and then, curious about a new print. She'd linger longer than she used to, sometimes asking how I balanced shop life with personal care. Ashley continued to help, her folding precise, her focus unwavering. She'd even started her own sideline of floral-pressed greeting cards, crediting our shop's techniques when people praised her work. But neither asked for stake in the business. They simply showed up, gifts of presence rather than demands of obligation. I never shared my financial records. I never boasted about the lottery win that had funded it all. The shop's books reflected revenue from clients and classes, not windfall. Because what mattered wasn't how I got here. It was that I had arrived. No one needed to know the backstory. They saw the result, a thriving creative space where stories were printed in ink and blossom petals, where every visitor walked away with something meaningful. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the pines, Troy and I locked up the shop. We stood on the porch listening to the cicadas awaken. "Can you believe this all started with a scratch-off?" he asked, slipping his arm through mine. I smiled. "That ticket was just the spark. You were the fuel." He shook his head. "You gave me more than money. You gave me belief." We stood in comfortable silence, sharing a quiet triumph. No grand gestures, no family fanfare, just two people grateful for the journey that had taught them to honor their own value. Inside the shop, a single card caught my eye, a thank you note from Iris's residency students. It read, "Your work taught us that art isn't always about being seen by the many, but about being known by the few who truly understand." I pressed my hand to the card, feeling tears sting my eyes. Sometimes victory is quiet. It doesn't demand an audience. It doesn't need cheering. It blossoms in the hearts of those who choose to show up, who respect craft, who understand that some gifts are given in silence. Standing there, I realized how far I'd come from that birthday when a slap reminded me I had been invisible. Here now, I was undeniably seen by my community, by my students, by the craft itself. And if my family never fully grasped that, it was their loss, not mine. Because I found my place, not at their table, but in a world I built from scratch. A world where every imprint carried my story. A world where second chances became first-rate experiences. A world where victory was measured in connection, not in clamor. So to you watching this unfold, I ask, what silent victory have you claimed in your life? One that needed no applause to feel grand. Share your story below. Sometimes our quietest triumphs inspire the loudest echoes in others' hearts.